to see all of you are brave enough to come today. With rain threatening tonight, and rain yesterday, sandstorms, and me preaching. I wanted to start this out as a title of the sermon is, Why Did You Come? I want you to stop and think about this for a moment. This is not a judgmental thing. It's for your own thinking. You don't have to share it. If you want to at the coffee hour, maybe somebody will listen, maybe they won't. I don't know. But say to yourself, why did I come? What do I expect? What, if any, needs do I have, or do I think I have? Why am I here, is the real question. I used to have children's sermons, and they'd come up to me, and they would expect something, and I said to them one day, what do you expect today from the children's sermon? And the kids wisely fell into place and said nothing. I said, good, you'll get nothing to buy. And sent them back to their seats. The thread of all these scriptures could well be, what do you come seeking today? We just heard in the Old Testament reading of Samuel how the ark had been floating around in a tent. What it didn't mention was the ark had been in possession of the Philistines for some time, because when you captured the ark, you captured Israel, because you had God contained and you kept him there. David, his fame comes because he was able to retrieve the ark from the Philistines after so many battles and fights and so forth and so on, and brought it home. And then he realized he lived in a great famous house, and he also realized if he really wanted to be the king and really wanted to be recognized by Israel and Judea, because both of them were separated at that time, the 12 tribes were saying, maybe together, maybe not. He had to put the ark where they would all know where it was. And he ended up putting it at Jezebel, which is now Jerusalem, because that was a neutral territory, and that's where Samuel eventually built the temple that housed the ark. When you house the ark and you were responsible for it, then you house God, and you were responsible to God, and God was responsible to you in the way of thinking. But David is a minor king type person, spending most of his life as an outlaw. Most of his life as a minor irritation as a bandit leader. Sometimes with the Philistines, then he went ahead and rejected them and went with the Israelite and worked with them. David sort of was one of these type of people who had sensed where he should be and what he should be saying, what he should be doing if he was going to make it to the kingship. Remember, Saul was king, and David and Jonathan, Saul's son, were very close friends. Well, Saul didn't like David very well, and that's why David was on the run most of the time, because Saul wanted to kill him. Naturally, if you want to be king, you've got to kill all the other people who threaten your kingship, correct? I don't know how many of you want to be king, so be careful. With some luck and military skills and questionable political practices, David rose to power. Combined with the loosely federated tribes of Judah and Israel, were often at war with each other, at least fussing back and forth, and finally subdued the major power of the Philistines. And remember, we're talking about a very small area of the Middle East, which is still a very small area. It is largely desert, a few agricultural areas, but mostly sheep herding and eking out a living. Nothing very exciting. The Philistines just took it over because they could. And sons, we find that David's life was one of political struggles. Now listen to this carefully and think of all the history you've ever read. There was a lot of great infighting amongst all of David's offspring. There was a lot of infighting amongst all of David's wives, because you could have many wives at that time. Their sons were overthrowing the father. The father was fleeing and hiding out and finally retaking the throne. And the death of some, friends and enemies alike, were on purpose. Others were by association of family members. Others were death by closely trusted friends. It was a violent time, not much unlike the times we live in, is it? When you stop to think about it, nothing's changed much. The temple will be the house of the ark, of the house of God will be built by one of David's sons. God promises this. Judah and Israel are now one. The 12 tribes are coming under one leadership, and God will be housed invisibly with them. By housing the ark, you could combine the 12 tribes and keep them together. Then we get to Mark. The book of Mark is a fast-paced book of Jesus' activities and reactions of people. It has very little to say on the side. It says it boom, 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 boom. It's expected to be that way, and that's the way it was written. We come up on the scene where Jesus is teaching and he's healing, and large crowds are coming. This is early in his ministry. Remember, this is just after they fed the 12,000, 5,000, or how many of thousands they fed. But he's healing, and the crowds are coming. They're bringing the sick and the lame and the mentally ill to be healed. How many of you have seen or heard Jesus Christ Superstar? If you've heard it, that part where Jesus says they're all coming, heal me, heal me, heal me, and finally Jesus screams, go heal yourselves! That struck me as, yes, Jesus was real. How much can you take before you just get up and scream? Ask Linda. Anyway, it was thought this time of illness was considered a product of sin, a product of evil doing, or of evil spirits or demons. And so casting out demons was a part of the healing, and forgiving sins was a part of the healing. But Jesus' heart goes out to them because they're looking for something beyond. They're looking for someone to heal them and to take care of them and to let them know they have value. I don't know if they heard his message at that early or not. I don't know why they came. I don't think we can get into their minds and say, why did you come? Why are you here? Are you here to hear a new message? Are you here to hear God's love? Are you here today that was been waiting for the reinstitution of David's reign? When we will be free and a powerful nation, unoccupied by foreign nations or threatened by those on the outside or the inside? Are we once again favored and protected by God? Or are you here? Why are you here? The scripture reading of Mark leaves the impression that people came because they were desperate to be healed. They had loved ones healed, and not to see or hear of a new age, although the massive healing must have been an indication something new was happening. Here was truly a man of God. We cannot get into their minds. We don't know what they expected. We don't know what they thought or heard or even considered. All we know is they came, and they had depended on the religious leaders to lead them and keep them right with God, and Jesus realizes they have failed miserably. And he sees their sheep without a shepherd. So it seems to matter that he healed them without hesitation. But when he got exhausted and tired, he thought he'd slip away. So they got their boat and they paddled down the ray a little bit. But of course everybody saw where they were headed and was already there when they got there. So he had more healing to do. And then we get to the bulletin or letter of Ephesians. I like John's professor because he's one of those who say no, it wasn't written by Paul. The other side says, yes, it was written by Paul. Depends on which seminary, which professor, who's talking, which PhD got written last. But that's not the important point. The important point is debated, if you could at that time write in another person's way of doing things, even sign his name, and it was not considered unfair or not to do that. So if you want to go home and write a nice novel by Stephen King, go ahead and sign his name, and then I'll visit you later when you're paying your fine. But let's not get hung up there. It doesn't really matter. Really, the argument is whether it's a letter or not. That's where they say it didn't belong to Paul. They're not even sure it was a letter, but some say it's a bulletin sent out to the general church in general. Because remember, at this time, the early church was already split into two groups. One group saying, you must follow the Jewish law and just incorporate Jesus Christ within it. The other group saying, no, this is an entirely new situation, a new message, a new way of looking at life. And so Paul could have well written that, because Paul certainly would have believed that. Because the letter of the Ephesians says to us, the circumcised and the uncircumcised no longer matter. We are now one. That one little surgical thing that, oh, I can't imagine. All right. But anyway, think about this. That one thing. But Paul is saying the wall has come down. The two are one in Jesus Christ. The practice of such things as circumcision is not the point. The point is, through Jesus Christ's death and resurrection, God has accepted all persons, Gentile and Jews alike. They are all now one. Radical thinking. To understand the imagery of that wall, it was customary in the synagogues to have a wall. If you wanted to go to the synagogue and worship with the Israelites, you could. But if you're a Gentile and uncircumcised, you had to sit on that side of the wall and not enter into the area where all the chosen ones were. So those of you today who do not feel that you want to be with us, you can sit in there. That's what they would have said. You're not part of us. Go sit in that room. You can see, you can possibly hear, but you cannot be part of us. Okay? That is what Paul is talking about when he talks about the wall coming down. And he's talking about the new separation. He's talking about being brought together as one. We would have to, and walls are great in our society. Stop and think how many walls you've run into in your life. And I hope not with your cars. We are all separated in areas of society. We've been separated by social, religious, wealth, status, and as you might well expect, the final separation and the most symbolic. And back in the old days when the civil rights movement was at its height, I used to say, only until we allow blacks and interracial marriage will we finally have civil rights. How did I know we'd get beyond that and get other kinds of marriages that we don't even know if they're civil or not? But they're right, aren't they? It's where we separate. Marriage seems to somehow strangely be the separation point where we bring people. But we as a species, think about this in biological terms. We as a species tend to be tribal. We tend to be a group. We tend to be chimpanzee-like. We're closely related to us. But we are very much groupy. We tend to see some as right, and some that are to be accepted or tolerated, but not accepted as equal or a full part of who we are. A liberal feels we must tolerate others, but most liberals I've run into add with reservations. I don't know. I never considered myself a liberal. I'm the most conservative person on this earth. My folks told me even when I had my little stocking cap and they wanted to change it for something else, I held on with both hands and screamed, "Don't make change." I hate change. It's like the world is made up of an exclusive golf club, and those of you who belong to golf clubs do not take offense. This comes from when my daughter got married and said, whenever she was married, at one of these golf clubs around here somewhere. We immediately were informed you will not wear denim. She wore a denim garter. It was a no denim zone. No denim zone. Shirts must have collars. Membership is screened and carefully maintained by certain rules and expectations. The only way you'll get in here is if somebody knows you and lets you in that belongs already. Her mother-in-law did, and that's as much as we'll talk about her. Wealth and fame can help one gain entry. Knowing someone will get you in the gate. But once in the gate, throw away your Levi's and get your polo shirts and put a collar on them quick, and be sure to get a nose job. Make sure it's a long nose so you can look down on the less fortunate and outsiders who just don't fit into this group. Or we can tolerate them but not inside the gates. These self-imposed rules give a false sense of security and self-imposed superiority. You can hear it every day in the news as people battle back and forth over whatever is a hot social issue at the moment. You hear the same thing. Well, but, yeah, you know. But we view these groups without the trappings. They are the same. The rules do not make better behavior. These simple rules do not make better looking or a more desirable person. All they do is prop up a false sense of value and acceptance. They cover up jealousy and greed and insecurity and fear, and above all, a self does not really value itself, except that it can prove it's better than someone else. When our identity is dependent on the rules and absolute protection of the socially acceptable, mores of the group then become paramount. The mores of that group then become so paramount, even if it means crucifying the one who challenges us at that point. Paul's writing to the Ephesians. Ephesians are on the bulletin of the church, the large states, circumcised and uncircumcised, we are now one. Paul is basically saying, get your act together. Quit isolating and attempting to separate and claim one over the other in God's world represented by the church. We must think of that the same way. Fundamentalists, evangelicals, Pentecostal, liberal, free-thinking, found the light, humanist, whatever, get your act together. Quit claiming the total truth and the correct way. I don't know how we're going to get along with our Christian neighbors. I really don't know. I don't know if they can get along with us. But isn't that a challenge we have to face? Don't color code your success. Don't say, look how great we are. Don't say, look at our history. We did this and we did that, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. Everyone can say that. Everyone can point to this and that and t'other and claim something great and wonderful. Don't color code your success and your piety and your superiority with statements, we are not like those others. We accept. We are without prejudice and hatred. We don't condemn. We are correct, and eventually, or maybe never, those others will come around and like us. We've already condemned them. We've already been prejudiced against them. We've already said they're not quite as good as us. We've already put them down. Prejudice and other manifestations of God's church is a sticky point. But where do you draw the line? We make hateful and prejudicial comments without a moment's notice. Without a moment's notice that is not far from our religious leaders that God expected to carry forth His message and lead the people in Israel. Jesus' day. God said, I brought you judges, I brought you prophets, I brought you a king, and you all have failed. You continue to go your own way and do not do what I asked you to. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees had failed to lead the people of Jesus' day, and He said they're like a sheep left without a shepherd. Jesus sees the crowd seeking Him out to be healed and attracted to a message that says God cares about you. He calls them a sheep without a shepherd. The religious leaders of the day created rules and laws that expanded the Ten Commandments, so effectively excluded most of the population. They elevated few to very heights because Paul, for one, who was very much one of the strictest of Pharisees of his day, and was out running down Christians and getting rid of them when God said, stop, knocked him flat, blinded him, said, okay, why are you kicking me against a goat? Whatever a goat is, they've never figured out. They don't want to know for sure. And then then Paul went on and began to realize he had a life to live. But the Pharisees had established a no-denim zone, kept their walls intact with power, with greed, and worst of all, religious zeal that replaced God and put themselves up as God. We need to be aware we all have a tendency to do the same, and we all have a tendency to build walls. It's just something we didn't know about ourselves. We don't need to beat ourselves up with it, but we know it. I do. We need to heed Paul's telling us that we're all one in Jesus Christ. So sometimes we have to realize another person finds Jesus Christ in a different way. Another person may find worship is more appealing to them if you yell and scream and holler. Personally, I'm a very quiet, timid, reserved person. Those kind of things make me so nervous I would die on the vine. But I recognize other people, that is their way of life. And they find God that way, and I can tolerate that as long as I want to be part of it. We're no longer separate groups, but do not build walls, but do tear them down. The walls are gone. We need to find common ground with our fellow Christians. We need to recognize recognize their needs, and we need to recognize that we're not superior or smarter or high pious than others. We need to recognize and listen and speak softly and pray for forgiveness. We all have a faith journey. Some have started. Others are still online on Google seeking the cheapest ticket and the best motels on their journey. Don't condemn them. They'll get there. It is time to get going. It is time to take off. It's time to let God be your guide. Let God direct you. Some hotels you may look great, not look so great on the outside, but they have a bed inside. What else do you need? Linda and I stopped at a motel in the middle of the night, and I said, in the morning we're going to be glad we didn't see this in the light. And we were. But put God in your history. Put God in your life. Do not hide behind the walls that are really only facades that protect your fears, your self-doubts, and cover your self-gain. Will this be easy? No. Will this be safe? No. Will this lead to material wealth? No. Will this eliminate self-doubts, fear, and pain? Not necessarily. So you may ask, why even start the journey? Because if you don't, you'll never get anywhere, and you'll never know what you missed. It makes it possible, though, to accept ourselves. It makes it possible to realize, warts and all, we still have value. It will lead us into a life that has meaning. We will become a dot on an I in a 1,000-page manuscript. But do you realize that matters? Because every I must have a dot in a manuscript to make it an I. Otherwise, the manuscript is incomplete. But if you become a dot on the I, you make the manuscript complete. Because the God of our life, and not only has meaning, but He makes our life and your life and everybody's life complete. May we pray. Our Heavenly Father, we continue to thank Thee for being with us, that we might be a dot on the I. We that our lives have meaning only through You and in You. Help us to recognize and allow other people to be who they are, with acceptance, love, and recognition. And this we ask in Thy name. Amen.
Amen.